Tibet in 2023 is many things but not silenced. Tibet continues to remain the least free country in the world in terms of its ever-deteriorating human rights, political rights and its civil liberties under the brutal occupation of the Chinese Communist Party. The year saw increased restrictions and surveillance in Tibet, arbitrary arrest, religious repressions and assimilation of Tibetans into the Chinese state's sinification drive. Let's discuss more on China's human rights violations in Tibet in 2023 with Mr. Tenzin Kunkhen, Research Associate at the UN, EU and Human Rights Desk at the Department of Information and International Relations of Central Tibetan Administration. Touch the leg and welcome to our program, Kungela.
Thank you for having me.
So, around the world, 2023 is described as the year of disruption, and the world has seen the undeniable reality of climate change and deadly earthquakes and devastation of war. And untouched and unseen by the rest of the world, Tibet continues to break down, and as Sikyong would call it, Tibet is dying a slow death. So how would you describe human rights violation in Tibet in 2023?
Surely. The 2023 has been called as a year of global conflict, and with the Russia and Ukraine war in its second year and Israel and Hamas war still going on, there has been a lot of deaths and killing of human lives all across the world. And as the post-pandemic world still, strives to deal with these conflicts and crises, Tibet has been, for the last 6 decades, been the place where some of the most visible and egregious human rights violations by the Chinese Communist Party has been taking place, and last year is no different. 2023 has been a year where Tibet was named the least free country in the entire world for the 3rd consecutive year, with a freedom score of just 1 out of 100, and China has been named as the worst abuser of internet freedom by the Freedom House report for the 9th consecutive year, which shows that the freedom of expression and access to information on social media and the crackdown on influential individuals and bloggers were still ongoing inside China. And the Chinese government's Sinicization campaign, as they would say, which means converting everything into Chinese characteristic, has intensified last year, evidenced by the ongoing operation of colonial-style boarding school in Tibet, where nearly 1 million Tibetan children have been forcefully subjected to political indoctrination campaigns, and they were separated from their parents, and they were given little to no opportunity and space to learn, to get acquainted with their own language and their religion and their culture, in their daily lives. And we also saw that the Chinese Communist Party, through its state-run media, have been increasingly focusing on its own narration that the colonial boarding schools are actually there to help the Tibetan children. But what they fail to note down is this pressing issue with the curriculums, where Tibetan children are denied the opportunity to learn their own language, where the Chinese Mandarin has been the focus of the entire curriculum in these schools. They fail to address these concerns in these, their narrative, and we also saw that a total of at least 40 Tibetans, were arrested just for their, expression of their culture, their identity, and among them we got to know that at least 8 of these Tibetans have been sentenced, to to prison terms ranging from 1 to 3 years at most, and which shows that the Tibetan people living inside Tibet have actually no right to express their own practice their own culture, their own identity. And we also saw the promulgation of various regulations by the Chinese government. For example, the cybersecurity law has been in effect since February of last year, and then in September the Chinese government promulgated the measure for the administration of religious activity venues, which has the sheer objective of cracking down on the already restricted atmosphere that Tibetan people are currently living in. And moving on to the cases of political prisoners, we saw that the Chinese PRC government have released Tibetan prisoners in very poor health and on medical parole due to the torture and the punishment that they have suffered while imprisoned in the Chinese prisons. And we also saw the surveillance and the monitoring of former political prisoners who have been actively engaging in the advocating for their language rights. For instance, Tashi Wangchu, the former language right activist, have been attacked on multiple occasions by the CCP goons, and he has been denied a license for his registration to register his business, which shows the plight of the Tibetan political prisoners, and the suffering they go through even after they're released from the Chinese prison. Yeah, so that's the overview of the human rights situation in Tibet in 2023.
As you have mentioned, the last year also saw the new cybersecurity law, which increases surveillance and censorship on Tibetans in Tibet. So can you tell us what were the major impacts of the surveillance in 2023?
So the cybersecurity law, which came into effect in February of last year, is actually the continuation of the existing cybersecurity law of the 2016. But with specificity to the Tibetan, the so-called Tibet Autonomous Region. And the main objective of this regulation or the law is to, intensify its surveillance and monitoring of the Tibetan individuals for their activities on social medias and online sites. And one of the major requirements of this law is that the Tibetan people are strictly restricted from engaging in any discussions or talks related to Tibetan culture, religion and language. And if anyone is found discussing on these issues, they will be severely punished and subjected to imprisonment. As similar to many other laws, the PRC regulations, they deliberately fail to mention that such activity will result in violations, which gives the authority the arbitrary power to point out that any activity that Tibetan performs will constitute a violation of the law. Because if you don't mention any specific activities which will constitute a separatism, as the Chinese authorities called, and which which puts the Tibetan individuals at the mercy of the PRC authorities' own narrative of the crime or the activities. One of the articles in the cybersecurity law, specifically the Article 11, it says that anyone seen to be posing a threat to the national security and public interests or deemed to be anti-socialist or seen as engaging in separatism by maintaining any association with the Tibetan independence groups or individual will face punishment. So which means that any Tibetan who makes contact with individuals or organizations that exist outside China and which the Chinese government deemed separatist will severely be punished. And we also see that the individuals who share pictures, speeches, videos, and other digital contents online are also liable to be punished under this new law. And as you mentioned, the major impacts of this strict surveillance is ever since the promulgation of the law in 2016, the cybersecurity law, Tibetans have been denied freedom and space to express themselves on in real life as well as on the online on the internet. In the month of March last year, a Tibetan woman named Yang Tso was arrested after she was found sharing pictures of His Holiness the Dalai Lama on social media or WeChat groups. Another Tibetan woman named Wang Chukso from Amdo province was also arrested in October last year on the same charge of sharing pictures of His Holiness. And in October, in the same month, a Tibetan man called Sampel, he was summoned by the Chinese officials to the police station, and they immediately confiscated his mobile phone and checked the content. He was arrested and imprisoned, but there was no, information on his current whereabouts or his well-beings.
So the PRC's new regulation that came into effect on 1st September last year was to intensify restrictions on religious freedom inside Tibet and also elsewhere in China. And China's State Administration for Religious Affairs promulgated the measures for the administration of religious activity sites, and also popularly known as Order Number 19, marking a significant escalation in PRC's government's ongoing crackdown on religious freedom in Tibet. So can you tell us more on the repercussions of this policy in Tibet?
The promulgation of the new law on the governance of the religious activity sites, which went into effect in September of last year, is another step by the PRC government to crack down on the religious institutions all across China. And for Tibet specifically, this new law forced the Tibetan religious institutions to adopt the CCP ideology, and will force to adhere to the so-called Sinicization of Tibetan into Chinese nation state. And the new measure is China PRC government's another approach to attack and smear the fundamental principles of religions into Chinese nation state. And if you look at the so-called Order Number 19, it's right from the first article. It states that the Order Number 19, the measures have been promulgated in accordance with the Chinese Constitution, which theoretically guarantees religious freedom to its citizens. But if you look at the article first, it contradicts, that there aren't any, religious freedom for its citizen, as mentioned in the Constitution. And from the foremost article, we get the sense that of the authenticity and the genuineness of the new regulation. And if you look into more detail into this law, we see that the Article 3 of the measure forcefully requires the religious institutions, which includes Tibetan Buddhism, Christianity, all the major 5 religion that exist in China. They are forced to adopt to the Chinese ideology. But it's shocking that how will a religious institution, adopt an ideology of a system which doesn't believe in religion at all? Because the CCP is an atheist government, and they require these religious institutions to adopt their ideology, which shows that their main aim is to destroy the principles and existence of this religion. And if you look at chapter number 2, we see that the PRC government has made the registration and registration of these religious activity sites to be a very complicated task, because the involvement of CCP cadres in the local and provincial level, as well as the so-called management organization, which requires an individual of Chinese nationality who is also a resident of mainland China, and the involvement of the CCP cadres in the process of registering these religious sites made sure that the CCP ideology and their rule will have a say in the existence of this religious institution. And we also look at if we also look at Article 16, it also states that any religious institutions, they don't have the right to name the particular institution after a system or a sect or a person. But in Tibetan Buddhism, all of our monasteries and temples are named after one, like a lama, or it is related somewhat to our religious sects. But this regulation shows that the Chinese government is hell-bent on eradicating the existing principle and tradition of these religious institutions. And it also mentioned that all the architecture of these religious sites or institutions have to be Chinese in nature, because which shows that these religious activity sites must adopt the architecture of the Chinese characteristics, which is straight disregard and disrespect to the traditions of these religious institutions. And lastly, one of the article mentioned that the religious activity sites must not construct a huge or a sky-high statues of their religious teachers or lamas, which shows that the CCP government is trying to justify retrospectively their actions over their demolition of religious statues that have occurred in 2021 in Tago region, because nowhere in the world you will see any law restricting anyone from constructing a huge religious statues, only in Tibet and China. So with this, the Chinese government is actually trying to stop and intensify its already restrictive policies related to the freedom of religion of the Tibetan people. More than half the cases of last year were related to individuals' exercise of their religious rights. And we see that Tibetan individuals are getting imprisoned and punished for engaging in religious activities as simple as building or carving money and prayers on a on a stone. The PRC government obviously have wrongfully charged them, of carrying out separatist activities just because they engage in the traditional practice of their own religion. 4 Tibetans have been imprisoned to 2 years merely for initiating a religious gathering in their own town, where they have burned, when they have taken part in the Sangsul, the burning of the juniper, and they have discussed about Tibetan Buddhism with the local residents. So because of that, they have been sentenced to 2 years in prison.
And also in the frequent news coming from Tibet last year was the news on Gompuki's protest against the Chinese government on imprisonment of her brother Dorje Tashi, a well-known entrepreneur who's without a trial at the moment, right? And also, can you tell us what do you understand of her and her brother's status right now, and the case related to injustices by the Chinese repressive policies on Tibetans?
So the case of Gompuki's protest, for against the Chinese government for a fair trial of her imprisoned brother Dorje Tashi, who happens to be very successful and successful businessman, and it is important to note that Dorje Tashi was actually arrested and imprisoned, on the wrongful charges imposed by the Chinese authorities. He was imprisoned, and then in 2010 he was, subjected to life imprisonment on what the Chinese government say on the charges of loan fraud. The actual, charges that were put against him were fake and false. We see that a group of 6 Chinese legal experts have concluded that the actual charges that were put against Dorje Tashi is not consist of loan fraud, as the Chinese government have accused him of. And as for Gompuki, she has every right and the freedom to protest against this unlawful sentencing of her brother, and we see that in the last year she has constantly been demonstrating sit-ups and protest against the Chinese court, and a few times near the police station. She wants her brother to have justice. She knows that the trial against her brother Dorje Tashi was false, and she has every right to call for retrial, which is also in accordance with the Chinese constitution. But the Chinese authorities, instead of responding to her aspiration and her request, they have physically assaulted her. They have intimidated her while in detention to stop these demonstrations, and they have blatantly violated her fundamental rights. And we also saw last December that Gompuki and her husband, they were detained for a short amount of time after they have protested to give justice to Dorje Tashi. So as of now, Dorje Tashi's case is still ongoing, and we also know from his testimony that he has been subjected to severe torture and punishment in a Chinese prison, and we also got the news that he's currently in very poor health. So if it keeps on going, then we believe that we fear the worst for Dorji while he's in the Chinese prison.
So amidst all the unjust stories from Tibet under the hands of PRC, like you have just now shared us the story of the news of Gombuki's fight for her brother Dorji. So the year also saw the international support for Tibet. In a sense, many governments like US and the EU, we have seen the positive news of passing resolution on Tibet in their respective countries or in their parliament. So can you tell us its significance in terms of creating more awareness and on human rights violation in Tibet?
As for the United States, the Resolve Tibet Act have been in the process. If it comes into effect, will eventually pressure the Chinese government to engage in dialogue with the Tibetan representative. And we also saw the United Nations special rapporteurs and the United Nations Human Rights Council actively encouraging discussions on the situation inside Tibet. In February last year, we saw that 3 UN human rights special rapporteur condemned the Chinese government's ongoing policy of colonial boarding schools. And we also saw that the United Nations Committee on the Social, Cultural and Economic Rights, in its concluding observatory, they questioned China on the ongoing situation of the colonial boarding schools. And we also saw the United Nations experts questioning China on to give credible information on the arrest of 9 Tibetan environmental activists who were arrested and imprisoned to a long prison terms just for engaging or advocating in the conservation of Tibet's environment under as a result of China's projects that has been taking place in Tibet. And we also saw Canada, pressurizing China to stop these colonial-style boarding schools, which, if left unchallenged, have the potential to result in the extermination of Tibetan identity, in the younger generation of Tibetan kids in Tibet. And the EU, the European Union Parliament also, put up a resolution a few months back condemning China's colonial boarding schools. We are in constant need of these international supports, and we got these supports in last year, and we are looking forward to, keep raising awareness on the Tibet issue, as well as building strong alliances with this international community, so as to, resolve this Tibet and China conflict.
And in November last year, the CCP released the new white paper on Tibet by China's State Council, which claimed to have brought development in Tibet with figures and alleged achievements in terms of human rights, religious matters, or cultural-wise. So what do you make of it?
When you look at the white paper, we see that it has created a lot of prosperity and happiness inside Tibet, while using the language that is the very characteristic of the Communist Party. We also see that it is the white paper asserts the Xi Jinping's narration, or the attempt to force the Chinese characteristics inside Tibet. And while the white paper paints a very beautiful picture of Tibet last year, but it lacks or what it fails to show is the actual, core projects like the colonial boarding schools, the policy of mass relocations of Tibetan nomads from their traditional land to the Chinese government buildings. They fail to, focus on these issues in the new white paper, while barraging a lot of figures and achievements in order to obviously disinform the international community. And the release of the white paper in November, it coincides with the with China's fourth Universal Periodic Review, which is scheduled to take place in January of this year. And with the white paper, the Chinese government, attempts to paint, a pretty picture of Tibet and PRC government's achievements in Tibet, while hiding all these, while hiding the realities of the human rights violations, in order to, as I mentioned, misinform the international community, because during the Universal Periodic Review, the states will be questioning China, and the white paper is another one of China's propaganda tool to whitewash its human rights violations in Tibet. It contains a lot of narratives and assertion of the Xi Jinping to realize the Chinese characteristics in Tibetan culture, religion and language. And we also see that the PRC government have failed to mention the about the COVID-19 situation in Tibet, where a lot of Tibetans were forced into the so-called zero COVID lockdown policy, which has resulted in the death of lots of Tibetans, and we don't see it anywhere on the white paper. And not to forget that the replacement of Tibet, the word Tibet, with Xizang, is a blatant attempt by the Chinese government to to disregard the association of the word Tibet from the international community and its cultural essence. So we see that the white paper have replaced Tibet with Xizang to claim legitimacy of its rule in Tibet, and it fails to address the real issues that is existing inside Tibet.
Tenzin Kunkhen, so these are my questions for today, and it was very insightful discussion that we just had. And thank you so much for talking to us about the human rights violations in Tibet by the Chinese government in 2023. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next episode of In Conversation with Tibettv.